It's time to fact check all these bitches. Okay, so I don't usually post shit this quickly because I'm fucking busy and I have to get busy. Like now, I should be doing shit. I have lots of things to do, but so here we go. I was on X last night, and I seen somebody post some garbage, and so I had to reply, and that was it. So I thought I'd talk about it. So some of you don't, when you run into that situation, you might know what to do. No, you won't. Maybe you will. I don't know. So they were like, Christopher Columbus was a fucking tyrant. Let me read the exact fucking thing that they said here, so you know what they said. So what started it was Elon Musk said something about immigrants in Italy, and then somebody else responded that wasn't Christopher Columbus a criminal that was an immigrant or something of the sort. Like, people like to talk about weird shit. It doesn't fucking matter, really, does it? Like where did Christopher Columbus come from? Did he did he prefer apples over oranges? You know, that's relevant shit. Or was he Jew? Was he Jewish, or was he Catholic or Christian? You know, that stuff's relevant because it'll change the whole fucking story and reasoning why we celebrate Christopher Columbus if he was a Jew or Catholic, right? Absolutely not. And then so I said to the people, I was like, what do you mean by criminal? And then they responded with a Vox, VOX, article. And those guys are, I believe, very, very popular news people, right? And they have documentaries, maybe even on Netflix. Like there are some big shots, you know. They must be some big shots with some big money, being able to spend time to do research and take care of some shit, right? And so they posted one of those guys' articles, and so to shut me up basically. And so there was 9 things that Christopher Columbus did that made him a tyrant or a criminal or something of the sort. So I was like, oh fuck. So I gotta fact check these or debate these with these guys, be like, who's right and who's wrong, right? And so this is what I did. So I'm gonna make a episode here to go over those things. And the article reads that there's 9 reasons why Christopher Columbus was a murderer, tyrant, and scoundrel. And I believe in the beginning of the article, they're like, there's so many more things, we just can't mention them all here because we don't have enough paper and ink, right? Something like that. Well, here's how the article begins. It says, in somewhat old hat at this point, to point out that Christopher Columbus, in whose name children are off school and mail isn't delivered today. So it's like a holiday. That's what they're saying. It's a fucking holiday. And they're like, why is it a holiday? Why do some people get to stay home from school on Columbus Day? And why isn't mail delivered today? Because of that bitch. They say that Christopher Columbus was a homicidal tyrant, meaning he went around killing everybody. If he's homicidal, he kills everybody. He's a tyrant. He's going around just killing. And they say here that Christopher Columbus initiated the 2 greatest crimes in the history of the Western Hemisphere, and the Atlantic slave trade and the American Indian genocide. Now there's articles from historians that say that genocide is just a new term that people use, that throw around over the last 30 or 40 years or something like that. Don't quote me, but it's something of the sort. I've read, and that the numbers aren't as big as they said they were, you know, and they're trying to, create dramaticism. So they're trying to use some kind of made up objective facts with everything else edited out around it, right? So they could get you with the subjective ideas. So these people like to point to one or two things to relate, right? They usually relate to Hitler. He was Hitler from 500 years ago or some shit like that, right? And they never bring up Stalin or fucking or Genghis Khan, right? Or any Islamic army. So nobody knows those numbers that are true. And like I said, that if those numbers are true, like I said in past episodes, that they said that they wiped out a lot of these articles say that Columbus and his people wiped out the whole population of Native Americans at the time. But if you see these immigrants that are coming to your borders or coming to your towns, those are the people that were wiped out. So yeah, they weren't all wiped out because they are still here. So think about that one. Not only that, they are angry, and they're angry because of these people that write these articles. They say stuff like, "You deserve it, bitch." Anyways, here's the 9 things that Vox pulled out that said that Christopher Columbus is bad for these reasons. And so here it is. Number 1, Columbus kidnapped a Carib woman and gave her to a crew member to rape. And I was like, how the fuck do you write that? I was like, we know what happened. We did an episode on Cuneo, or however you pronounce his name. So let me break this down. What happened at the time? In that era, every continent was attacking other people for land and women and wealth. Every continent. That means Asians were doing it, Africans were doing it, and Europeans were doing it. All of these people were doing it. Christians, Muslims, everybody. And so when this guy did this to the girl, this Cuneo took the girl in his cabin, and if you remember the episode, that he tried to get his way with her, and then she scratched the shit out of him, and then so he got some kind of rope to whip her with. And then she gave in to him, and then he said that she was like became very sexual after that. But the point I was making is that it was a very common thing at that time. So you can't say it's like, oh, this was like, everybody was civilized and peaceful in the world except for these guys here, which is bullshit. You know that. And at the same time, we don't know what Columbus said to that guy. It's like, because they were going through battles with the Carib people and with natives and then with whoever at the time, and there was war prisoners, and they gathered people, usually to take for slavery. This was a thing that was going on all across the world at that time. So we don't know exactly what the conversation was when Cuneo said to Christopher Columbus, "Hey, can I take this girl into the cabin?" He's like, "Sure." He could have been like, he must be wanting to learn how to dance, and so maybe they're dancing together. Maybe Columbus thought. Who knows? We don't know. We don't know if Christopher Columbus actually said, "Take that woman in there and take off your clothes." We don't know if he said that. It doesn't say that anywhere that I know of, at least. So whatever that guy did with the girl, to whatever extremes he went to, is Christopher Columbus responsible for that? If Christopher Columbus wasn't in the room with those two people, was he responsible? Now, this girl was naked, like a lot of the Indians were naked at the time. So when he took her in the room, it's not like he had to work hard to take her pants off, right? So I don't know. We don't know what exactly happened at the time and how much Christopher Columbus was involved. So these motherfuckers put that as number one on this list so they could get you subjectively. Even though at the time it was very common for this stuff to happen across the world through militarized duties, I'm not saying that like Columbus is like, well, this is what they do. You might as well have fun. We don't know what they said, so you can't even fucking put it there. But they were dividing people up, and some people were taking ownership because that's what they did across the world at the time. And so Christopher Columbus could have said, like, okay, these 3 or 4 people are yours, and these 3 or 4 people are for this guy, so on and so forth, right? Okay, so that's kind of weird to put that as number one. So maybe it did happen, but we don't know for sure. So they're writing this based off assumption because that's how shit happened back in the day, and they're saying like, this guy's the worst because that's how everybody was back then, and we should not like this guy, but we should like other people, even though other people are just like this guy, right? Get what I'm saying? Okay, so number 2, it says on Hispaniola, a member of Columbus's crew publicly cut off an Indian's ear to shock others into submission. So what the fuck does that have to do with Christopher Columbus? So this doesn't really talk about exactly what happened. If you remember that episode where the guys were traveling, I think it was eastbound, and crossing a river, and then they got into a little battle with some guys and ended up taking some prisoners from that battle, prisoners of war, right? Just like they did in Vietnam, just like they did in World War II, and so on and so forth. This is common stuff that happened throughout the world at that time and to the present day. Let me add this little edit here. Ear cropping was common back then and for hundreds of years after and before that. So ear cropping was a punishment that happened. It wasn't like, holy shit, they did it. And today, how often do you see people with their ears cut off? You don't see it because it's not a punishment nowadays. But back then it was a fucking punishment. And that's what they did to those guys in battle. Not to those guys, to the one guy that we know about. That's in the writings that they did the ear cropping. So yeah, they want to get you real emotional and dramatize things. They're like, holy shit, they cut off his ear. Well, yeah, it was a fucking common thing back then. And that guy had his ear cut off, and then they walked him over to Christopher Columbus. I don't know how long it took for him to walk there, whether it was a couple hours or a couple days or whatever, right? It didn't talk about how long that happened. It just wrote about it, So it was a common thing then. Ear cropping. And they did it to Christians. Christians did it to Christians, and they did it to other people as well. So it was a common thing. It's not like, see, they're just trying to get you like emotional and just be like, holy shit, how could they do something like that? It was a fucking thing that happened back then. A lot of old fucking punishments were strange. Just imagine they burned people at the stake at the time, They do a lot of weird shit. So anyways. And so these guys punished one of the Indians by cutting off one of his ears and then taking these captive Indians back to Columbus to have them executed. And Columbus received these Indians with one of them with the cut off ear. And he says, you know what, guys? You guys are free. You guys could go. We don't know exactly what happened. We don't know exactly what the conversation was, but he let them go. It's not in this article that Columbus let them go. They just said that Columbus was friends with this guy, and this guy did it. Columbus wasn't even there when the guy cut off the ear. Columbus received the guy with the ear cut off. As far as I know, as far as we know, right, from the article memoirs. And at that time, the Indians also took some more of the Europeans, and then Columbus and his people had to go get those other guys back. And when they arrived on horses, all the Indians were afraid of the horses, so all the Indians ran off into the distance. Those were interesting times, but that's what was written. So number 3, Christopher Columbus kidnapped and enslaved more than 1,000 people on Hispaniola. Okay, so now this 1,000 people is in reference to when they had that little battle after the ears got cut off by that particular tribe of Arawak on Hispaniola. They chased off a bunch of different guys with their horses and so on and so forth, right? So they ended up taking some of the people and bringing them back to Spain. Now here is a letter from Cuneo, however you pronounce his name, the sexual guy that took the girl down in his cabin. He wrote a letter, and this is what he said. When our caravels were ready to depart for Spain, aboard which I intended to return home, we gathered our settlement, 1,600 Indians, male and female. We loaded 650 of the best, both men and women, aboard these caravels on February 17, 1495. And it says, regarding the rest, it was declared that whoever wanted some of them could take them as he wished, as so it was. When everyone was supplied, approximately 400 still remained, who were permitted to go wherever they liked. Among those were many females with nursing infants, who, so as to better escape from us, fearing that we would return to take them, abandoned their children to their fate, leaving them on ground and fleeing like desperate persons. They fled so far that they distanced themselves 7 or 8 days from Isabella, our settlement, beyond mountains and great rivers, so that it will be nearly impossible to take them in the future. Among the captives was one of the kings, who, 2 principal men, it was decided that they should be executed with arrows the following day. For this purpose they were shackled, but that night they were so adept at gnawing at one another's heels, with their teeth, that they escaped from the shackles and fled. In the meantime, I departed for Spain aboard those caravels, and we sailed in heavy and contrary weather, and it was necessary to turn back 3 times, so that we passed a month among those islands. And for this reason, seeing that we had few provisions, we set our course to the north, and proceeded approximately 600 miles. As pleased God, we had such favorable winds that we passed from the island of Boriquin all the way to the island of Madeira in 23 days. But by the time we had reached Spanish waters, approximately 200 of the Indians have died. I believe it was because they were unaccustomed to the air, which is colder than theirs, and we cast them into the sea. The first land we sighted was Cape Spartel, and very soon after we reached Cadiz, where we unloaded the slaves, and half of those slaves were sick. For your information, they are not men made for work, and they fear greatly the cold and do not live long. So after that battle at the river, and Christopher Columbus had released the prisoners to be set free, and then they were told that other Christians had been captured, and then they went and tried to retrieve those guys. After that, they gathered a bunch of people, some 1,600, and then they took them on the ship and took them to Spain. And a couple hundred of them died, and they threw them overboard. So when I wrote back to these guys on X, I was like, well, this is what happened. And this is what happens at war, right? This is what Hamas does this is what Muslims do to other people in battles. To this day, there's a lot of people that are captured and raped and then their dead bodies are just thrown off, right? And it wasn't just Indians that were or slaves that were thrown overboard. Even when Christians died on their own boats, they threw the men overboard because they're not going to drive around for a month or two with a dead body. And so it made sense for them to throw those people overboard. So it was like, I guess, like a cemetery in the ocean. So yeah, so they want to blame Christopher Columbus for taking these criminal or not criminals, these people, these victims of war, or these people that were captured after a battle, and when they died, they threw them overboard. And it's pretty crazy that he wrote that they actually bit off each other's ankles or feet so they could escape. Now, these Indians were said to be cannibals, so they must know how to eat through people's bodies, I guess. And so these Indians ate off each other's feet, bit off each other's feet, till they had no feet so they could get out of the shackles, and then they somehow jumped overboard. That's what's written. That's what he wrote. How believable is that? It doesn't seem very believable. Because if these Indians were on a ship with the Spanish, how would the Spanish let them get away? And if they were eating each other's feet off, they must have been screaming in pain. So the Spaniards must have seen it happening. Either they sat there and watched it happen, and they're like, look at this crazy shit going on here. This guy's screaming because the other guy's eating off his feet. And when he has no feet, he's going to eat the other guy's feet off so he could escape. That doesn't make sense. But that's what's written here. And so these guys, these Indians, supposedly escaped. That's what's written. And they're blaming Christopher Columbus for it. Doesn't make sense. But this is what happens in war. And so a lot of leftists want to push for war because they like war, right? Now they do. They like war and riots and destruction, right? Look what they did to the United States, well, all over the world, actually, right? They just went and destroyed shit. And they look for a reason. The leftists look for a reason, any reason. Like that drug addict guy that got killed. What was his name? He got killed, and so, like, the rioters just started destroying cities and looting stores in his name, in this drug addict's name, this criminal drug addict's name. And they put up statues of this criminal drug addict like he was somebody, but he was nobody. And he was somebody you probably didn't want to meet, or you hope that you didn't run into in everyday life, right? Like normal day, right? You hope you didn't run into him at the store when he was doing one of his mischievous things, right? And they got a statue of this fucking guy. Crazy. But yeah, these people like war and destruction today in modern times, right? And bad things happen in war. People die and things get destroyed. And so if you don't want that to happen, then you should stop fucking war. But it'll never stop because that's what humans do. So anyways, let's get on to this Vox list here. Number 4, Columbus forced Indians to collect gold for him or else die. Now, I didn't see this part of it, but after that war with Quanabo, however you pronounce his name, after that battle when Christopher Columbus came back from Jamaica and Hispaniola was like in chaos and a lot of the Europeans were dying and everybody was unsafe, so Columbus pacified the situation, brought peace to the island by subjugating all the people, putting all the people to work and enforcing laws. And at the same time, he made his enemies slaves. And so they were carrying the Christians around on their backs, and the Indians were digging for gold and all these types of things that they did back in those days across the world, right? There was even African kings and leaders and Muslim that did similar things. So like I said, at that time, this was a common thing when conquerors came in. And Christopher Columbus had them wear some kind of thing that signified whether or not they dug enough gold for that day. And there was a lot of gold in the region. And so, as it was noted throughout the writings, that they found so much gold. And so they made the Indians bring so much gold every day. And that they were enemies, Columbus says, wear these things so we can mark, a check mark to say that if you did today's work, that you did enough work and gathered enough gold. And if you didn't, then you would be punished. So you better work hard. And so that's what happened. He turned his enemies into slaves. So this is where that all started. After that battle. Number 5 on this list. It says about 50,000 Indians committed mass suicide rather than comply with the Spanish. So this paragraph here, I don't know where they're talking about. They don't give any specifics of when or where that happened. They just say things generally here on this article because they don't want you to really have it easy to fact check this. So, 50,000 Indians. It makes you think that a bunch of Indians were sitting around in a circle, 50,000 of them, and everybody's like, "Hey, drink this poison, and we're all gonna die." But we can't even get half the country to vote on closing our borders here in America. And at the time, 50,000 Indians all got together and agreed on taking poison. It isn't very believable, is it? And like I said, these numbers were embellished. Was it 50,000 or was it 49,500? Was it? They should have used the word approximately 50,000. And at the same time, it's like, you got to think like, well, people are saying that a lot of these numbers are embellished. So, and not only were they embellished, did it happen all at one time, or was this over a period of time? And was it during the time of Christopher Columbus? Because this is an article about Christopher Columbus, not other people. And so far, we got a couple of these points that were made that happened under other people, not Christopher Columbus himself. And which we will get to other points of this article later, but they said that Christopher Columbus had opposition there, like some of the Spanish or some of the Europeans or some of the Christians there were they didn't go along with Christopher Columbus. So either they were really rude or really dangerous people, or maybe Columbus was and they didn't want to go along with it. So did Columbus have these people treat the Indians so bad that the Indians had to kill themselves? Was it because of Columbus or was it because of the other people? And like I said, Fonseca had a lot to say to the governors in Hispaniola. And Fonseca, there was a lot of people that weren't on Columbus's side, that were on other people's side in Spain. Now, did these rules from the other people, did they create chaos on the islands? Did Fonseca tell his people to whip or beat or kill the Indians if they didn't do particular things or broke the law? We don't know if it was Columbus or Fonseca that did it at the time of Christopher Columbus. Because we know what happened after Columbus. It was all due to other types of governorship that affected the Indians. It wasn't during Christopher Columbus's tenure. So they like to reference to Bartolome de las Casas that somehow counted all the Indians that died and how big the population was after so much time. And that was way after Christopher Columbus, years after Christopher Columbus was around, right? So there's not a lot of evidence on these 50,000 Indians that committed mass suicide. It says here that the Indians destroyed their stores of bread, so neither they nor the invaders would be able to eat. They plunged off cliffs, they poisoned themselves with roots, and they starved themselves to death. Oppressed by the impossible requirement to deliver tributes of gold, the Indians were no longer able to tend their fields or care for their sick children and elderly. So obviously, if they had a certain number of amount of gold that they had to capture. This was after the battle when Christopher Columbus took those enemies, those particular enemy tribe, and put those markers around their chest to signify whether or not they worked hard enough. This were those people. It doesn't give a date on here. So, but it had to have been after that battle because it didn't happen before that battle. During Christopher Columbus's second trip to Hispaniola, his second visit, this is when it happened. And so it says here that they had to dig for so much gold and they couldn't take it no more, so they started killing themselves. It wasn't really mass suicide, not like everybody sat around in a circle, like I said, and poisoned themselves. Some people jumped off cliffs. Others poisoned themselves with some type of roots, and others did other things. It wasn't like all at one time, people all died at one time. 50,000 people, or approximately 50,000 people, committed suicide all at one time. It's like some people did this at one time. Some people killed themselves at this time. So it's very loose. It's a very loose description, very vague description here of what happened. But then again, of course, maybe it could have happened. Maybe a guy was standing there, a Christian, was standing there in an open field, and to his left there was about 10 Indians drinking poison, and then he looked to his right, and there was a bunch of Indians that were jumping off cliffs. Then he looked behind him, and he seen people starving themselves to death, all at the same exact time. Approximately 50,000. It was actually 50,001 Indians. Let's make it fucking exact, right? So anyways, that's number 5. That's a subjective fact, right? It's not a fact. It's a subjective writing. And they try to get your hearts and not your head, right? So they just wrote it as that. And who wrote those numbers? Was it Christopher Columbus's opposition? Possibly, because people were wealth, right? Slavery, and then people to help fight the Muslims, and then people to be Christian and to join their community. So why would they want them dead, right? They didn't want them dead, because today we think that, just because somebody's color of their skin, that people don't like one another. And so Columbus maybe showed up, and you're thinking that Columbus showed up and he's like, I don't like their skin tone. Let's kill them all. I think that's the idea they want to give you. But no, that's not how it worked. And so, because they wanted slavery or build an army or integration or something like that. So this mass suicide wasn't like what you might think it would be, even if it happened like that, right? Anyways, let's move on. Number 6. 56 years after Columbus's first voyage, only 500 out of 300,000 Indians remained on Hispaniola. Another approximate number. 56 years after Christopher Columbus's first voyage. So Columbus was dead at that time. So they can't blame Columbus for this. A lot of people are trying to find out who the first actual first people on the American continent were. Who founded America actually? Was it Vespucci, or was it the Chinese, or was it the Africans, or was it the what else did I mention? Could have been anybody else that was here first. So if it was 56 years after Christopher Columbus, we have to blame the first person that was in America. That was the fucking Vikings. You bitches. See? Now let's get the fucking Vikings involved. Or was it the Africans? The Africans were the first ones here. We got to blame the fucking Africans for this. What happened 56 years after Christopher Columbus? Why did these people care about who first found America? If the relevance is why we're here, then 56 years after Christopher Columbus, the populations had dwindled, diminished. Then we have to blame the first people. And who were the first people in America, bitches? All right? Let's fucking blame them now because of what happened, right? 56 years later. It was the fucking Vikings. Let's attack them. Let's get their statues. Let's hate their movies. Bitches. Christopher Columbus was on the side of the Spanish crown and the Christians, and so it wasn't just because of him or of the people, because in the year 1542, the Spanish sovereigns made a law for the protection of the Indians, setting up the self-governing Repúblicas de Indios, where Europeans were not allowed to own land where the Indians were. So they gave Indians rights. So they wanted to protect the Indians. And Queen Isabella also wanted to protect the Indians. And like I said, Bartolomé de las Casas wrote that Christopher Columbus didn't do much of anything bad to the Indians that wasn't necessary, with war and battles and so on and so forth, right? Etc., right? So like I said, a lot of these numbers were embellished or approximate, right? And there's some historians that say that the numbers were embellished, and others that say that the numbers weren't big enough, right? It depends on what side of the stage you sit on, left or right. So we get an approximate number to catch your subjective imagination, right? To catch your heart, not your mind. That's why they want to tell you those numbers. Then they want to reference to Hitler, because you know who Hitler was. There's a lot of information on him, right? And then when they could reference to Hitler and say, Columbus and his people were like Hitler, and then at the same time you hate Hitler and then you'll hate Columbus, and then you could say, well, Donald Trump's like Hitler. And then they would be like, oh shit, he's like that guy and the other guy. Fuck, we're fucked up now, man. But it's all bullshit. You know it. You know it's true. They're fucking retarded. Those people are so stupid. But anyways, that's why we're here to fucking fact check a lot of this bullshit. Whether you disagree with all of this or some of it, we're fact checking it. And you could do it too. It's fun. Bring your friends and family. Your mother gave me AIDS. What? Why did he say that? Okay, let's go. Move on. Number 7, Christopher Columbus was also horrible to the Spanish people under his rule. So here it says that Christopher Columbus was very mean to Spanish people. He had very strict laws. He ordered at least a dozen Spaniards to be whipped in public, tied by the neck, and bound together by the feet for trading gold for food to avoid starvation. He ordered a woman's tongue cut out for having spoken ill of the admiral and his brothers. Another woman was stripped and placed on the back of a donkey to be whipped, as punishment for falsely claiming to be pregnant. Then he ordered Spaniards to be hanged for stealing bread. This is what Columbus did to the Spaniards, and the Spaniards were just a bunch of common, regular people just hanging out, and Columbus is like, fucking let's fuck them up, right? Supposedly. Like I said, Christopher Columbus had enemies. Fonseca was one, Bobadilla was another. There was a lot of guys that were going against Christopher Columbus. And then now these head people had a lot of people, governors, and then people underneath the governors of a group of people that wanted power and control, that fought against Christopher Columbus, whether they lied about him or talked shit about him or tried to get Columbus out of power and so they could take it. There was a lot of this going on the islands. So politics, that's how politics are, right? Democrats against Republicans, or however the fuck you want to put it, right? Christians against Muslims. There's always people fighting against each other. It's my idea against your idea. And our ideas give us control and power. Whether, it's the way it is, right? So I like this one that Christopher Columbus ordered Spaniards to be hanged for stealing bread. Isn't that like laws in Saudi Arabia? Don't they have laws like thieves like have their hands cut off and shit like that? Isn't that like present day Saudi Arabia or somewhere in the Middle East? Muslims do something like that to this day still. Like like nowadays you could be like, oh, that's so cool. Man, they know how to fucking make sure people don't steal, right? It's like cut off their hands to show an example to the other people, or hang them, or cut off their heads, right? In present day. But it's okay in present day, especially if it's Muslim, because they're not white people, right? It's okay if they do it to bring peace and justice, right? So, yeah. Columbus had a lot of enemies. And they had harsh laws back in those days, right? They burned people at the stake if they thought they were witches, right? So what the fuck you want? What the fuck you want? What the fuck you expect, bitches? Oh yeah, you could subscribe to this channel if you want to. And if you don't, you go fuck yourself. Get the fuck out. Unsubscribe if you don't like it. Get the fuck out of here, you bitch. That's right. Unsubscribe from this bitch and go away. Think it hurts my feelings, you little bitch? Go fuck yourself. And let's get back to it. Let's get back to the this Vox statement here, or letters, or numbers. Number 8, settlers under Columbus sold 9 and 10-year-old girls into sexual slavery. Okay. Now, in this actual writing, in this letter, you see it says sexual slavery, and it says 9 or 10-year-old girls, and the same thing Vox says here, right? Now, how true is it? We don't know. But here's the quote. There are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 years old are now in demand, and for all ages, a good price must be paid. So in this letter, they're talking about how there's dealers. There was dealers there. And like I said, there was people that were buying and selling and gifting people from Africa, from Europe, and now the Americas. And this was like, they're writing this as if it was like the only place it was happening in the whole world, and the only people that were doing it in the whole world. That's bullshit. They're just trying to get you the feel for them, right? And it's like, dude, it was going on everywhere at the time, you bitches. And since they were 9, 10 years old, that's another way to get you present day. Be like, oh, fuck, they're doing that to little kids. And I said in Acts, I was like, yeah, these girls were the same age as the Muslim prophet Muhammad's wife, right? At the time, for some weird fucking reason, they liked 9 or 10-year-old girls. I don't know why. It's kind of retarded if you ask me. Like, why would somebody want why would Muhammad, the prophet, Islamic prophet Muhammad, Why would he want a 9-year-old fucking girl? Of all the women they captured, beautiful 19-year-old girls, 25-year-old girls, he wanted a fucking 9-year-old. Why? It's stupid. Like, what are they going to do? What are they going to talk about? What do you talk about with a fucking 9-year-old? You talk about nothing. A 25-year-old will have a lot to say. Not only will she have a lot to say, she'll be experienced with sex and everything, 9-year-olds aren't experienced with anything except for playing with fucking toys. They don't know shit. Why would these fucking retards want 9 or 10-year-old fucking girls? Doesn't make sense. Like, remember that quote I made in that African episode from the Makuria with the Muslim, when the Muslims were invading the Christian areas of Africa that was, I think, south of Egypt somewhere? The Nubian kingdom. So these, I think it was Arab Muslims, came to attack the Christian Africans. And then they kept trying to defeat the Africans. And the Africans kept winning until the Muslims kept conquering other lands of Africa. And when they conquered lands of Africa, like Christopher Columbus wanted to do, they conquered lands and made slaves, took some women, and they took some of these captured people and made them militarize them, right? And so after so much time, after trying to defeat the Christians in Africa, the black African Christians in Africa, the Christians said, fuck, man, these Arabs are getting too dangerous. So we're going to have to make a treaty with them because there's no way we're going to fucking defeat them in war, right? And so they created the BACT, the BAQT, the BACT treaty. They say it was one of the longest treaties in human history that lasted like 6 centuries or some shit like that. And it had been, rewritten at various times throughout those centuries, whether they added stuff or took some stuff out, right? But at the time, if you remember that episode, I quoted when they said that the Christians wanted so much bread, wheat, flour, fucking water, and so on and so forth, etc. And the Muslims wanted slaves. And now these slaves, they said that the slaves had to be both men and women. They couldn't be decrepit old men and women. They needed to be young, good-looking young men and women. And they had to have had puberty already. I don't know when does puberty hit, 10, 11 years old? So even in Africa, they were looking for little kids that were at least hit puberty by that time. Maybe it's 9 or 10 years old. Maybe the thing they did on the Christians did on the American islands was the same thing the Muslims did in Africa. They wanted people that hit puberty already. So, and then, healthy people. Yeah, Muslims were biased against handicapped people that, couldn't run fast or were maybe too fat to climb or carry shit, right? So they're like, we need healthy people. Yeah. So this is what happened on every continent. We have evidence. You could fact check all this stuff and you could look it up. You could find out where it happened and when and why and so on and so forth, right? It happened. So that's that. What the fuck? Man, I went off big time on that one, didn't I? So yeah. Back in those days, they fucking married young people. It's very strange. But that's what they did. I don't know why. Because there's beautiful 25-year-old girls or 19-year-old girls or 35-year-old girls. They didn't live that long back then. I know that. But still, even 45-year-old girls. You see them, they get real pretty. Some of them have really nice skin. There's a big majority of them that don't take care of themselves after 35, but even younger. But yeah. So Vox wrote this on there to get you to feel for these people. They want you to think that these were the only guys doing it. Like, holy fuck. But yeah, everybody was doing that at the time. Every continent this was happening on every continent with every people at the time. So nobody was special at the time. You bitches. Time to unsubscribe from this channel, you fucking cunt. Go fucking watch some CNN, you bitch. All right, here you go. Let's go. Number nine is the last one on this fucking list. Indian slaves were beheaded when their Spanish captors couldn't be bothered to untie them. I don't know about this one. It says that that the Indians were captured and they had shit tied around their neck. And when the Christians wanted to move these guys, they're like, you know what? I don't feel like untying him. Just cut off his head. I don't know. I don't know when it happened or who said it and who those particular Indians were. But beheading was really common back in those days. It's very strange how they used to execute people back in those days. I mean, they still do it in south of the border of the United States. There's still beheadings, right? The cartel does it. I think some Muslim Islamic radical Islamists do it as well. It's still a common thing. I mean, with radicals, right? So people do weird shit when they're in war and battle, right? Or conquering areas. So, yeah. So they just want to get you emotional and be like, holy shit, that's so terrible. So that's what this article is here. I mean, yeah, so has any war been peaceful? And you defeated them really nicely. You were so gently conquering those lands. That was so nice. It was so nice the way you dropped those bombs on people and defeated those people to win that war. I mean, war is never peaceful and nice, is it? Battles are never peaceful. And especially 500 years ago, people were pretty rough and to each other. And they are still to this day. You can find it all over the world today and in history. So what they're trying to do here is just get you to hate Christopher Columbus himself. And not anyone else, right, in history. Not anyone else that was non-white, right? They want to destroy your history. They want to destroy America, and they want to destroy Western civilization as if it was the only one that ever did particular things, right? But Western civilization seemed to be really good at writing things down, so we have a lot of stuff to look back on, right? And Asia did the same thing. Asians, right? There's a lot of historians say that there's three races of people: Asian, Asiatic, black, and white, right? Or Caucasian. And there's different terms for each of them, but they say there's three: people from Asia, people from Africa, and people from Europe. And now if you look at like different, like I was trying to get a loan yesterday, and there was a thing I had to fill out, and they said, what race are you? And there was like fucking hundreds of different things to click, and I was like, what the hell is this? And why does it matter to get a loan? Why do they even care, right? That's like if I want, like, it would be really crazy, like if in the future, because of all the cancer of human civilization destroys all the cities and loots all the stores, to where in the future we are forced to buy everything online because of the radicals out there destroying stuff. And so if in the future everything we have to buy online, and they sell to you based on your your social credit score, right? Your social score. It would be funny if in the future they say, hey, your people, the white people, have been bad. So you're only allowed so much bread and water and soap because of who you are. And then so I'd be like, I want 2 loaves of bread, please, for this week. And I'd be like, what race are you? I'd be like, what the fuck does that matter for me buying bread? Oh, because we need to fill it out to figure some shit out before we could sell it to you. For what, bitch? So anyways, that's what I seen on X, and that's when I was like, I had to tell them, all these fucking leftists, how it is, right? Whether they want to believe me or not, or believe the memoirs. Like, not definitive. Maybe they're correct on a lot of the issues, right? Or the things that they wrote down. Like the one guy took the girl in the cabin. Did Columbus have anything to do with that? Or does anybody have anything to do with that in modern times, when that happens? In war? Huh? Bitches? And 9 or 10-year-old girls, that was a common thing at that time. And they talked about it a lot in this article. There was even an edit at the end of this article that said, we verify that it was 9 or 10-year-old girls that were being sold, and they liked them. They liked 9 or 10-year-old girls. Yeah, fucking people were weird back then. It was common, like Muhammad. Why the fuck did he pick a 9-year-old girl when there's so many other girls he could have talked to? Right? If you say it was some stupid mythology god thing, then you're retarded too, right? Then why the fuck did he marry the other girl, right? He should have just fucking found the first one when she was an infant and married her when she was an infant, right? If she was the one sent by the gods or some bullshit like that. You fucking people are retarded. Go fuck yourself. I'm out of here. Adios.